this video, what I want to give is an overview of squeegeeing. Now, squeegeeing seems like a really simple thing, especially to experienced installers, but what often do you forget about when you're an experienced installer is how long it took you to figure out how to squeegee. So this video is not only mainly for beginner installers, but it's also for advanced installers as well, especially as you get into PPF and tin or you start doing applications that you're not quite used to. Getting those tips and tricks for squeegeeing can really help save a lot of time, help avoid having to redo those panels, especially if you squeegee wrong and you damage it and have to replace it. So in this video, what I want to cover is basically what type of squeegee you need, and there's lots of different styles of squeegees you have to cover in terms of like wet install, standard type of squeegees, PPF, all that kind of stuff. You also have to think about the type of buffer you're going to use, and then the squeegees can be either hard, soft, or medium. So I'm going to talk about which type of hardness you're going to use for different types of applications. Sometimes you need a buffer, sometimes you don't, and a lot of different times when you're squeegeeing, you kind of change your angle, whether you're squeegeeing open-faced or closed, and then also 45, usually 60, and then 90 degrees. That angle will change based on what you're wrapping as well. So we're going to cover all those aspects and all types of installation that you generally do: walls, windows, floors, cars, PPF, and tin. Let's get to it. So let's begin with squeegees and really kind of understanding specifically what types you're generally going to use overall when you're wrapping. Okay, so let's begin with, let's say, wet installs or tint. Tint, you have different styles of squeegee. In this sense here, this is really good for getting in little crevices and corners, and generally the edges are really thin, and you're not going to put a buffer on these at all. They're just kind of a hard card, so you want to make sure they're nick free. So you got this type of shape. You also, for the main flat areas, you have a longer shape right here, and again, this type of squeegee comes in different hardnesses as well. So generally the hardnesses are denoted by the color, so you'll get used to each different brand has a different color for the hardnesses. And then you have ones with handles where you can really kind of put a lot of pressure on to force the water out. This is really beneficial, and a lot of some of them actually, this replaces nice and easy, where you pop it out and you can replace it once this gets nicked up. So with these type of squeegees, really important to make sure that the edge is nick free. If it has a nick in it, you definitely can't use it, because you want 100% of the edge super smooth when you go to squeegee. And then make sure when you put it in your bag, maybe try to protect it and put it in maybe a Tupperware container so this doesn't get beat up. So this is for wet installs. For floors and walls, generally for large flat areas, you're going to use wider squeegees, so you can use less squeegee strokes. So with these type of squeegees, again, same story, is different colors should denote different hardnesses. So with this particular manufacturer, green is hard, yellow is medium, red is soft. So with these type of squeegees, you can just get longer, wider areas to squeegee in nice and easy, but you're not going to use this for all type of installs. We'll break that down in a second. So wider squeegees are definitely beneficial to have in your bag. Then we get for PPF. Now PPF, you have different type of squeegees as well. So here with these type of squeegees, no buffer on these as well. So the buffer here, and there's no buffer, it's just a nice, good nick-free edge. And then you have these different types of squeegees that are more flexible, so you can get in different areas as well. So some are hard, some are stiff. Again, just make sure these are nice and easy in different shapes, so you can do different things, get into curves and stuff like that. Now we have what is called standard type squeegees. These standard squeegees are generally around 4 inches wide, maybe just a little wider, but again, these are based on, hardnesses, medium, hard, soft. Most of the time you're going to use medium to soft type of squeegees for most installs, and this is what you're going to do for, let's say, cut vinyl windows, a lot of vehicles and stuff like that. You're using a standard size squeegee. The main thing with these type of squeegees, along with walls and stuff like that, is make sure you have a good buffer. Your buffer has to have no dirt in it as well, and generally for the most part you want a thin buffer, and you want to replace your buffer on a regular basis, pretty much before every install. There's buffers that are for dry applications, so again, these you can replace and stuff like that, and then these are wet buffers you can replace as well. Some buffers come and they're basically stitched into the squeegee as well, so that has benefits and negatives as well. And then some squeegees have magnets built in. Some installers like to have magnets. Some have curves, so you can adapt to different applications, and some there's actually called micro squeegees, and these are for really tight gaps, nice and thin. So for the most part, you want to make sure that all this type of squeegee, you're not going to have a buffer. So any type of time you have no buffer, nick free. Otherwise, replace your buffer and just make sure you use the right buffer for the right application. So based on this now, let's break it down specifically on how to squeegee, basic techniques, and then build from there into specific applications: windows, walls, floors, cars, PPF, all that kind of good stuff. Let's get to it. So now we get to squeegee technique, and those will work from the super basics on the way up. So basically how you're going to hold the squeegee is, for the most part, you're going to hold the squeegee no matter whether you're doing any type of installation, PPF, tint, regular wrapping on vehicles and stuff like that. 4 fingers on one side, thumb on the other. So you try to get your fingers as close to the front as possible. If you're too high up, it's hard to put enough pressure on the front of the squeegee. Maybe the material won't stick to the substrate as good as you want. So 4 fingers close, thumb up close, and then you just want to make sure you grip it nice and tight. So sometimes you can even put enough pressure where you can kind of even almost circle it sometimes for minor recessed areas. So that being said, mainly what you're going to do is, there's never a point when you squeegee with the entire length of the squeegee, because basically when you squeegee, you have to overlap your squeegee strokes. If you don't overlap your squeegee strokes, then if you're squeegeeing across, you're going to miss a spot and air is going to get underneath the film, air or water. So you want to make sure that you always overlap. So imagine that this is an area I just applied. So you're either going to overlap it with at least, let's say, 1/5 of your squeegee, but sometimes you're going to vary it. So how wide you squeegee a certain area depends on whether it's flat or curved. We'll get to that later. So mainly there's three different angles of how you generally squeegee. All right, first and foremost, you can angle at what's called a 90-degree angle. And what I mean by that is right here. My squeegee angle towards the area I just applied comes straight down here. So this is 90 degrees. So 90-degree angle, all right, oftentimes when you use a 90-degree angle, you can be wrapping something that's very, very flat, let's say like a wall, or you're doing tint. Sometimes though, you vary it and you can kind of angle your squeegee like this. Now if you angle your squeegee like this is more like a 60-degree angle. So 60-degree angle is still really good for flat substrates and sometimes for floors and stuff like that, but it's a little safer than 90. Now the reason why is if you squeegee at a 90-degree angle, oftentimes you're going to get wrinkles if you're wrapping a curve. 60 is a little safer, so oftentimes installers will go at a 60-degree angle. That means oftentimes you're going to squeegee with less of your squeegee area. So you're going to get less area as you angle your squeegee less, but that means it's a little safer and you'll get less wrinkles. For another angle, the third angle that people squeegee at is what's called a 45-degree angle. Right here, this is a 45-degree angle, less than 60, so right here, 45 is pretty standard when you're wrapping curves, cars and all that kind of stuff. So what you want to think about when you squeegee is 45, 60, or 90. Also, what you want to think about is just being super consistent. As I squeegee across, I'm squeegeeing at a 45-degree angle in this case, and we'll talk about when and where to use 45 degrees. Once I get to this side, I can turn and I come back on the other side, and I squeegee across, and I'm pressing hard enough to wipe off the marker right here. I turn and I come back, and I'm being consistently even. I'm not dipping down and going past this line. Once I get to here, I can rotate, and now I can come back. Notice in this case, I'm squeegeeing with half my squeegee. Half is on the section I just squeegeed right here. Half is on the squeegee where I'm trying to apply it to the surface. Sometimes I can vary this. I can vary it down where I'm squeegeeing with more of my squeegee, so I can cover the whole gap in this case. In this case, watch, I can cover the gap. I'm still overlapping, but I'm overlapping with less surface, and that'll really vary based on what you're wrapping. Also, you want to make sure you press hard enough. Notice right here, as I come in on this next one, if I don't press hard enough, I can see the line behind me. If I don't press hard enough, that means the material doesn't stick properly and unevenly, and then I can get air as well. So the trick with squeegeeing is you want to press nice and firm, and again, this will vary based on what you're wrapping. For the most part though, you want to squeegee with a nice firm squeegee stroke, side to side, and then you go back and forth. And again, you'll vary your angle based on what you're wrapping, and we'll really get into that specifically next. So the whole trick is keep 4 fingers on one side, thumb on the other, squeegee nice and even, vary your angle and stuff like that, keep your pressure nice and even, and go side to side, overlap, and life is good. So now let's break it down specifically to each type of install so you really know what angle, what type of squeegee to use, all that kind of good stuff, and that'll really help you get up to speed super quick. Let's get to it. When squeegeeing, it's very important to just have a very simple formula in your head. It's all about having the right angle and using the right amount of the squeegee width. So here's an example of using too much of the squeegee width and having the wrong angle. If you have the wrong angle and using too much of the squeegee, you get wrinkles or bubbles, which can lead to low quality or costly redos. So it's all about having the right angle and using not too much of the squeegee, but in some cases you want to use as much as you can, especially if it's flat. So let's get a specific breakdown and you'll understand what this means and how to apply it. We begin the specific breakdown on each type of application with tint, and here is your squeegee formula in order to get professional results. The majority of windows being applied with tint film are 100% flat. This means installers can use a 90-degree angle and they won't get tiny little wrinkles once the material gets pushed to the edge. This also means that they can cover huge amounts of area, so they can squeegee with 3/4 inch of their squeegee width. That means that they can cover large sections at a time. But because it's being applied wet, they have to apply firm pressure. Because there's no buffer on the squeegee, it's very important to spray the surface of the tint film with a glide solution, then apply firm pressure, otherwise the tint film will get scratched. And also in terms of reading the material and applying it safely without water getting trapped underneath, they have to read the moisture, then overlap their strokes accordingly. So this means that instead of squeegeeing side to side, sometimes they'll squeegee in a random pattern, just as long as they overlap the strokes and push all the material straight to the edge consistently. It's especially important when squeegeeing on vehicles to switch your squeegee based on where the access point is. So on certain areas, you're going to switch your card to get tiny little spots down, otherwise a wide squeegee cannot access. Now we get to PPF, and here is your squeegee formula in order to get it right every time. Like tint, PPF is a wet install. This means the solution underneath the PPF film can be either gel or soap and water. What's very important before squeegeeing is to make sure that the PPF is gliding on the surface before applying, otherwise moisture or bubbles will get caught underneath. The angle of the squeegee strokes can vary between 45 and 90 degrees. If you're working on a flat area, it can stay 90. If you get to a curve right here, switch to 45-degree strokes, and it can be an open or closed face squeegee. What is critical is to read the moisture and make sure that you overlap your squeegee strokes and force it out towards the edge. So this can vary your squeegee strokes in terms of pattern, but as long as you overlap and work the material out is key. And also peak the squeegee. It's one of the few applications that you're actually going to peak the squeegee and hold it at a high angle in order to really force that moisture out. Because there's soap and water or glide solution on top of the surface, it won't damage it. And in some circumstances, you can put two hands on the squeegee. This allows you to put the right amount of pressure on top of the PPF in order to force the moisture out. As long as you have the right angle, 90-degree squeegee strokes, you can use 3/4 inch squeegee area of the squeegee, and this allows you to cover the most surface area in the shortest amount of time. Now we get to cut vinyl, and here is the formula for cut vinyl and squeegees. For cut vinyl, generally the adhesive is very aggressive, so using a standard size squeegee is best. Larger squeegees can create bubbles and let the material stick too quickly on the surface. Oftentimes, especially if the cut vinyl has a pre-mask cover, use the non-buffer side. This allows you to put the right amount of pressure on top of the pre-mask and the cut vinyl so it sticks properly. Because it's such an aggressive adhesive, don't use too much of the squeegee area. Try to use half. If you use too much more, you'll get bubbles. And then always apply a large amount of force and double squeegee the cut vinyl onto the surface. So once it's been applied, always do a 360 on the edge and go back and forth over the area. You can use an open face or closed face squeegee. Now we get to floors, which are flat but can be a little tricky. So here is your squeegee formula before we get into specifics. For floors, generally very large areas are being covered, so you want to use a wide squeegee, very similar to walls and windows. However, because floors tend to be a little aggressive, it's hard to pick the material back up. Instead of squeegeeing at a 90-degree angle, which can cause wrinkles, try to squeegee at a 60 or 45. 60 is the best optimal squeegee angle in order to avoid those type of wrinkles. Try to use half to 3/4 inch area of the squeegee itself. Using 3/4 can be a little tricky, especially when you get to curves, but for the most part, 60 degrees, large area of your squeegee, and try to keep the liner on as long as possible. Create about a foot area or 36 centimeters away from where the section is being applied. Floors generally are hard to pick up, and for small areas, change the angle in order to relax, especially when registering panels pixel to pixel. Now we get to window perforation, and here is the squeegee formula in order to get the right result. Even though window perforations are different in terms of install with tint because they're wet, window perforation you can use the same angle, 90 degrees as with tint. This allows installers to cover the most area in a squeegee stroke and not get tiny wrinkles on the edge. Always overlap your squeegeeing strokes. The squeegee can be open-faced or closed-faced, and you can squeegee with the widest section of your squeegee as possible, 3/4 inch. Make sure you squeegee side to side, or on sections where the backing paper comes off. You can also squeegee vertical with that 90-degree angle. Top to bottom, overlap your squeegee stroke and use 3/4 inch of that squeegee width. Now we get to the last specific breakdown on applications, which is for vehicles, and here is the squeegee formula. For the most part on cars, you always want to use an open face squeegee. This is because cars have curves and the material can tend to bunch up very quickly as compared to flat sections like walls, windows, and floors. It's also very important, because it has curves, to only use a 45-degree angle. Using a 60 or 90-degree angle will cause a lot of wrinkles on the edge. As soon as wrinkles tend to bunch up, it's very important to create glass first. This means stretching the material to even out the tension. And now it's also very important to not only have a 45-degree angle, but also vary the width of the squeegee used. For on certain sections, you're going to use 3/4, let's say on a flat area, but for areas where that has a recessed area, like in this case, you're going to squeegee in 1/4 inch widths. Very important to adapt. So because it has a small recessed area, you go to 1/4, but on a flat section, you can switch it back out to 3/4 width. So this is very important to adjust. Don't squeegee the same every time, which is very common on walls, windows, and floors. And the last two tips when working on vehicles is to use a soft squeegee. This will allow the corners to flex, especially when the material is being formed into compound curves and recessed areas. Also, to use a thin buffer. Using a thin buffer and using overlapping squeegee strokes at the right angle will help installers take the material farther with less heat and not overstretch.